The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good day, everyone. MBA Women International is pleased to present this webinar entitled Candidates, Hiring Managers, Recruiters, and Others, Understanding the Players in Salary and Hiring Negotiations. My name is Hannah. I'll be your moderator for this session. Please note that today's call is being recorded and all participant lines will be muted during this broadcast. If you need assistance at any time today, please email us at webinars@mbawomen.org. This session will last 60 minutes and include a question and answer period at the end. However, feel free to pose a question at any time during today's presentation. You may enter a question by simply typing it into the question box on your control panel and then clicking the send button. These instructions will be repeated later in the program. At this point, I would like to introduce today's speaker. Katie Donovan is a salary negotiation teacher, coach, blogger, and speaker on equal pay in women's salary negotiations. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Katie Donovan. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Hannah, and thanks everyone for joining us. Well, tonight for me, but for some of you it's still afternoon. And just so you know who's talking to you, here's a lovely picture of me. And our salary negotiation coach is such a unique thing. I'm aware of about 5 or 6 of us who do this. So probably some of you are wondering what exactly does that mean. And what I do is work with primarily women, and it can be getting a call the moment they get a job offer and wanting to figure out how to negotiate it, or starting the job search process and wanting to know all the traps along the way so that they maximize the salary offered to them when they get the job, because there are a lot of little traps along the way in the hiring process, or it could be for raise or salary adjustment. How I got involved in doing this, I have a background from staffing, higher ed, and the training for career management at a trade association, and then also working for an applicant tracking company. So I've had 20 more years of negotiating, working in the industry, and even studied negotiations in my MBA courses. So that's my background. You can find some writings from me on Forbes, Huffington Post, Salary.com's covered me or gotten quotes for different articles, as well as the Glass Hammer. I've spoken to our Harvard MBA alumni, as well as Holy Cross Conference for Women, Boston Glow, and a few other places. So that's just a quick background of who I am to help you decide how much of this you want to take as truth and how much of you are going to put a little grain of salt on it. But let's get started. Okay, so, and now my system's not working. It was before. Okay, here we go. Move the slide. So let's get started and talk about first a story to give you an idea how the decision to hire someone and the decision of what to pay someone are completely different decisions. So in my world, I encounter hiring managers a lot of the time. They'll come to a webinar or a seminar or some event with their employee hat on, but then they realize they also can take something out of it with their employer hat, their hiring manager hat. And one of them shared with me a story after an event about how when she was hiring a replacement, it was for a position that they had about 10 people up. And some of them may have had the junior added to the title, some senior. So they were averaging out of the 10 people doing it, $60,000 was the typical salary for that position. In replacing it, the job had been approved for a budget of $53,000 to $60,000. So that basically means we want the low end to get $53,000 a good person to get $60,000. Go a penny over that, you're out of budget. It's not approved. Not going to happen. But if you stay within that realm, do whatever you want. So she was working with a recruiter, and that's an internal recruiter. We'll talk about internal and external recruiters later. And her boss was also involved in it. And the recruiter did her job. She got a ton of resumes, searched through them all, got it down to a manageable amount to come into the office, meet with key people. The people all kind of gave the input to the hiring manager, and everyone was in agreement. There was one person who was the best, the one who fit the culture, who just was going to be the good person to hire. And when they looked at her application, she had filled in for desired salary $30,000. Now that's half of what has been approved in the budget for the job. And the recruiter was like, great, let's offer her $30,000. That was the recommendation from the recruiter. The hiring manager was absolutely appalled. And the hiring manager's manager said, I don't care what you do, just don't go over your budget. You guys figure it out. Do what you need to do to get the person in. So after a few days of infighting, they got to the point where the job was offered to the candidate at $53,000. That was the low end of the approved budget for the job. And of course, the candidate who was looking to make 30, maybe 35 in a perfect world, was just blown away and accepted it on a dime. Sure, I'll start tomorrow, I'll start yesterday. But had she done anything differently, she could have gotten more, because the hiring manager was more than ready to pay up to the $60,000, because she needed the replacement, and this person was a perfect fit. So the story kind of shows you how that perfect fit part probably was worth $60,000, but when deciding salary, it's not about the perfect fit, it's about what can we get the person to accept. So with that as hopefully a little bit of an eye-opening story for some people, and for others probably a jaded, yep, I knew that was what happened. Let's get into details of how, as you're interacting with the different players for either getting a job or negotiating a salary, how they all have different insights and different goals. So the first is to realize that the decisions are different. And in the hiring decision, they're really looking for cultural fit. Do you fit us in the sense that we can spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week with you? And if I'm the manager, does my management style that I prefer to use work well with you? Can I get the most out of you? Will you be helping me find solutions to our challenges? Will you make me look good to my management and people above me? And knowing that the company changes, no matter what company it is, it either dies or changes, are you going to fit with the future? So say your company is thinking about going international. Oh, you're multilingual. That's great. That fits for the future, even though today we're only in domestic in the U.S. So those are the things they're thinking of when hiring. When thinking of, so now we know who we want to hire, what are we going to offer her or him? What's the least amount of money that this person will accept? And throughout the entire job interviewing process, there are all these little spaces for them, the company, to find it. And it actually starts with the posting of a job without any salary information. They really want you to fill in the blanks for them. So you'll find desired salary on the application. You'll find salary history fields next to each job you have. All these little things to help them figure that out. And then, of course, the salary is actually budgeted. So before any job is advertised, it should be already approved and budgeted, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes a hiring manager can think that their job is so critical that they have to fill because someone just resigned out of the blue and no one expected it. Or the company all of a sudden did amazingly well in a marketing program and they need more salespeople, they need more customer service people, they just need a ton of people to handle all this new money coming in and new customers, and it's so critical, there's no way it's not going to be budgeted, so I'm going to start the advertisement for it and let people know about it. And then people are submitting themselves for a job that never is ever going to get approved. So that's the other part of it. The salary has to really be budgeted, and as long as the hiring manager stays within that budget, he or she is happy. They really don't need to save extra money. It's nice if they can, but as long as they're within that, they have no problem. Then there are the people involved in the decision. So the hiring manager is the person that gains the most and loses the most by a quick decision, a bad decision, a good decision. This is the person that every day they come into the office that there is a hole that is not filled in. They're either rolling up their sleeves themselves to fill it, or they're having the other employees in the department fill it, and then they're having the other employees in the department scowl at him or her or say, when the heck is this going to be filled? You're making our lives absolute hell. This is a person that gains so much and wants this to happen so badly that there's no one more important. This also is the person that's going to manage the candidate. That's why for this person, saving $5,000 isn't that critical. It is so much more important to make the day at work effective, enjoyable, and the other employees happy, that they are more than happy to go to the absolute top of the budget that's been improved. Because saving $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 does not make up the pain they're living through. They are the ultimate decision maker. Unless, there's always a caveat, unless they are not the actual budget owner. Sometimes you could be dealing with a hiring manager that truly is a manager level, and the budget itself is owned by a director or a VP. But they know their limitations and where they need to go a penny over this, you do have to get extra approval. They usually have that information from the beginning. So 9 out of 10 times, when and if you want to negotiate your salary, and I recommend you always do, it is with the hiring manager and no one else, although many other people will pretend they are the point person on this. The person who's most likely to pretend they're the point person on this, and let's see if I can get this to move. There we go. The internal recruiter. Now, where the hiring manager really is the power play person, most of us, when we're going to apply for a job or going through the interviewing process, it's the recruiter that touches you the most. And so therefore, a lot of us default that this is kind of the end-all and be-all. And they're absolutely not. They're very nice people. I like all of them. But here's the thing about them. They're a gatekeeper. Their only power is in the word no. They can never, ever, ever say the word yes, so they really have to enjoy no. They get, especially in economies, they're kind of troublesome, maybe 100 resumes for one job, 50 resumes for one job. And they're never going to look at all of them. They don't have the time, especially if they have a bunch of jobs open. So the resumes go into a big applicant tracking database. And the recruiter will do a couple of keyword searches based on the job description, which is based on what the hiring manager wrote or worked with the recruiter on, or they took an old job description and said, is this still viable? The recruiter knows buzzwords, but doesn't know the actual job, doesn't see how it all flows together, because 1 minute the recruiter, depending on how big or small the company is, could be hiring the receptionist, the security guard, the marketing manager, a finance person, an engineer, and the VP of whatever, or a C-level person. And absolutely no idea the difference between them, just knows key phrases. If it's a big enough company, then the recruiters do truly get more specialized and are much better. But still, it's the hiring manager that knows the true pains and the ins and outs and the specialties they need to fix their challenges. Some recruiters earn a bonus based on the money saved. So in the story I started with, the reason the recruiter wanted to offer just $30,000 is because she got a bonus based on the money saved for each of her hires. And it's very rare that you see $30,000 as a savings. You know, $10,000, sure, but 30 is pretty big. So I'm sure she was spending it the moment she saw that the candidate they wanted had written down $30,000. That actually pits the recruiter against you more than anyone else. Everyone else, their goal is to get you in, get you happy, and make it a good working relationship, and just keep it in budget. But the recruiter, for any company where there actually is a bonus of you make less money, the recruiter makes more, that's a bad setup for the candidate, and the recruiter doesn't have the ultimate say anyway. So you want to get around the recruiter for the hiring decision. All they can do is say no to you. So whenever you have the opportunity, when you apply to a job, try to figure out who the hiring manager is or the VP of a job is, and go to them directly and say, I just submitted my resume. I'd love to set up an appointment. Let them push you back down to the recruiter if needed. But they're really, it's really good to go around when you can. And when you do a phone screen with the recruiter, once again, they don't know the ins and outs of the job really well. So the best way to get them to say yes for you is to say responses that are really kind of mediocre, average. Because if you're really good and amazingly good at something, and you give an amazingly out-of-the-box, insightful answer to a question, they won't get it. Because if it's that unique and that out of the box, it's not going to fit into kind of the check boxes they have of these are the candidates that should move on to the next person. So for the recruiters, keep it very vanilla, very average, but good to move up, and then wow the hiring manager to get hired. They're typically the phone screens. I think I handled everything on this one. Yep, let's go to the next. So the next, as I try to get this to work, is an external recruiter. And they typically want you to make more money because they're the ones who typically are being paid by the company. The company truly is their client, not you, the candidate. A percentage of the annual income the candidate makes. So where maybe you getting a $10,000 increase in pay gets you $10,000, it may get the headhunter $1,000, and the actual personal headhunter, because they work for a company, like $20 when all is said and done. But still, they get more money, and so they do have an incentive to negotiate. They primarily care, though, that it's one of their candidates that get placed, so that they can get some money. And how it works for them is they will first talk to the hiring manager. That's where I learned to go around the recruiters. Day one when I worked in staffing, that was the lesson, go around to the recruiter. Day two, that was the lesson. And every day, did you go around the recruiter? Did you go around the recruiter? So you sit with the hiring manager and you find out all about the job. And you do nothing until you make sure there's a budget for the job. And it's about that story I said of how sometimes hiring managers can get so excited that, of course, this job is going to be approved, and it never is. And headhunters / external recruiters, staffing agencies, whatever you want to call them, will do nothing without a budget. Just not going to happen. Once they get all the information about the job, they then look at all the candidates in their database, and they're really looking for 3 to 5 people that fit the mark exactly. They will peg in a red hole all day long, happily, and each time each red peg gets $10,000, $15,000 more dollars than the last job. They are not the people to deal with if you're looking to go from being a writer to an engineer or vice versa, an accountant to a copywriter. They're not going to help you out in those transitions because they can't place you. It's not what they do. But if you're a copywriter and want to stay a copywriter, they will help move you to another place to copyright and make more money every day possible. And they're going to sell you. They're going to sit down and really get to know you so they can spin you the best way to get you into this specific job. And they're going to negotiate the deal for you because they make more money as well. But they're not going to negotiate out of the job. They see any pressure, they'd rather just get it done and get the money today and walk away and you have a job than push for some more. They're a good ally, but as I said, just know they're the perfect place to go for when you want to do what you're doing today but do it somewhere else or get more money than you're getting. I always tell people once a year you should call a recruiter or two. Say, this is what I do, this is what I get paid. Can I get more elsewhere? They'll tell you if you can, and they'll help you do it. Very different than internal recruiters. The next person is a budget owner. And this is usually the hiring manager's direct manager or even a level up. They have the absolute ultimate say on your compensation package if you're attempting to go a penny more than what has already been budgeted. Typically, they don't care. They may be the person involved, one of many people involved in your interviewing, and they'll give the input to the hiring manager, you know, this person doesn't seem like a good fit. This person seems a little soft on this knowledge. This person seems really good. And everyone that you meet with will give that kind of input because you might meet with someone from finance, someone from marketing, someone from sales, someone from engineering, and they'll all have input because they'll all have to interact with you depending on the company size. But ultimately everyone says, you know, you're the hiring manager, it's going to be someone you have to deal with. Out of these two candidates that we all seem to think are good enough, either one works. Go with whatever you think will work for you the best. That typically is kind of how the process is. And then the budget owner is like, yeah, and don't call me unless there's an issue. Like, just take it from here. I hope Monday I come in and the new person's here. If that's not happening, call me and I'll get involved, but otherwise I don't need to be involved. The next person is the little-known compensation specialist. I'm thinking up till now most of these players you're aware of in some way, shape, or form. Compensation specialists aren't as well known, but they work a lot. Big companies definitely have them on staff full-time and have multiple ones. Smaller, mid-sized companies will outsource this kind of thing, where they use a staffing firm could have a compensation to it, or companies that truly do just HR compensation kind of stuff. And what they're looking for is researching what's the value of the job. What's the value of the job in New York versus Tennessee versus Seattle? What's the value of the job with a high school diploma or community college diploma? Oh, she's from Harvard. Now we have a graduate degree, and oh, if it's a doctorate. All of that plays into it. And the compensation specialist cares about keeping things pretty consistent so that as you move from one level, you know how bigger companies have your A1/2 level employee, and then you can graduate up to A1-3 and keep moving up. They make sure those sections of how much from minimum to maximum of salary for each of those jobs are pretty consistent. You know, they don't have to be all exactly $20,000, but close enough that the compensation entire package, you know, signing bonuses are consistently given to certain instances. They're not just pulled out and would wreck any kind of precedent. Then they're the ones who make sure, you know, just because someone wants more medical insurance covered by the company, if they did that, it would have to change it for everyone. So that's not going to happen. That's a hard one to pull off. An extra week of vacation is very easy compared to let's get some more coverage of medical by the company. But they are really the behind-the-scenes person. You're never going to see them in the interviews. The only time you'll ever even hear about their existence is when you truly have, in the salary negotiation, bumped up to the top and beyond it of the level that you're in. Just because you have doesn't mean you can't keep going. A brilliant way to move that up is to talk about, well, how do I become a senior XYZ, senior accountant, a senior engineer, and move to the next level? And do I have the required education, accomplishments, experience to pull that off? Usually you do. The jumps can be pretty ad hoc, to be honest. It just allows them to keep some form of consistency. So that's a compensation specialist. It cracks me up that companies have these people, they outsource these people, and then they look at you when you're applying and say, and what would you like to make? It is perfectly acceptable to say, well, what have you budgeted the job for? I'm assuming you're not interviewing me if it isn't budgeted. So tell me what you budgeted. I'll let you know if that's in the realm of what will work for me. Because it really isn't about what your bills are. It's about the value of the job. So that's them. The last person I want to talk about is actually a person that you can hire. Would be the person working for you, a career counselor. They typically have kind of an HR background, and they're amazingly good for when you're trying to find your career bliss, find yourself. I don't like accounting, and I got my CPA. I don't like engineering, and I went to Worcester Polytech. I don't like any of the things I went to college for, and now am I supposed to stick with it? They're that great resource to help you get through that really tough transition and figure out the types of jobs that can fit the skill set you have or what your affinity is to. They have great resources about getting in touch with hiring managers and how to do the interview well and getting the resume right. They're not going to help you at all in the salary negotiation. They'll have a couple of keywords to say to you, but they really don't understand that. They are your employee at that point. You typically pay them a fee. Typically it's hourly. Sometimes it can be kind of a package deal. Really helpful for that. So if you're finding that you need help in interviewing, career counselors are good for that. If you're having a bad resume thing, actually resume writers, there are people out there that just do that all day long. Some really good, some amazingly bad. Get references for that. But that would be what a career counselor is. For the career counselors, what was I going to say? No, I think we're done on this one. We're going to move on. Now we're going to get to you. Yeah, because now we talked about the person you could hire. Now I want to get to you, the person that actually has a lot of work to do. The candidates are the ones that are interacting with everyone, doing the interviewing, and doing the salary negotiation. And I'm assuming you're doing it. I know for a fact you're not, but someday we're all going to do it because it really is just as critical as writing your resume, having the job interview. The whole process isn't over until the negotiation is done. That's really the end of the job search. The beginning of it is selling yourself. It's so much selling of yourself, and that's so difficult for most of us. It's not something we do all day long. But when you think of it as a section of questions, you're just answering a lot of questions when selling yourself. What are your experiences that have to do with what the job is? Actually, yesterday I was working with a client that was getting into every detail in the world, just getting down into the weeds that no one cared about, and it was very hard to pull her out of it and say, you need to respond in a way that feeds to the person that's interviewing you. And I'm a big fan of, in my salary negotiation process, really start with, let's find the number you're looking for. And then let's also develop business arguments of why you deserve that number based on the market value. So what are the big stories that show that you're really good and deserve the high end of the salary range? But they have to tie into the type of job. And they should absolutely have achievements that show that you increased revenue or decreased cost, because every single employee either is part of revenue or cost center. That's how big company, small, big, middle companies will get you. You're either cost, and how do you help shrink that cost, or you're part of the revenue generations, and how do you make that grow? And that's what they want to know about, the stories of that. You sell that story really well, you're going to be the one hired. You sell that story with actual numbers, not just I increased revenue by 10%, but I increased revenue by $1 million. That works better in getting extra $10,000. Other things they like to know about for selling yourself, your network. I always talk about Harvard people. It's my little joke for my network moment. Harvard people are smart. I'm not saying they're not. But they're not smarter than absolutely everyone else in the world. But the thing they do better than anyone else is network. They have a network, bar none, and they use it. And companies like to know that the employee we're bringing on has a network of like people that could possibly be future employees. They have people that could possibly be future customers, partners, investors, whatever it might be. So if you know what they're looking for those types of people, and you know your network fits into it, drop a name or two. It's helpful. As I mentioned before, alignment with the future and the cultural stuff is very important. So if you're already aware of what the company's planning to do in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and you know that a skill set that's not important now for this particular job that you're interviewing for, still bring it up and say, you know, I'm aware that you guys are thinking of having a French office. I speak French. Just throw it out there. It helps. Awards and accolades are another thing that really help in the interviewing and selling of yourself. Selling yourself, you want to, awards are really concrete. You know, I got Employee of the Month. The trade association that I belong to gave me an industry award, anything like that. The accolades are more of, you know, the VP of whatever sent me an email after a big project I did. Keep those on file, use those of how everyone was so excited about the work you accomplished, and then your education. So that's kind of the selling of you. But don't forget while you're so busy selling yourself that you need to be interviewing the company, because you can be an accountant in every company in the world. Do you fit in it? Will you enjoy it? Will you like the people? Is it in the city? Is it in a rural location? How quick a pace is it? All those things that matter to us all. Do I have to have lunch at my desk? Can I actually take a nice lunch once in a blue moon? Do I like my manager's management style? Is it micromanaging or not? Find out those things so that you know going into it you're finding a position that works for you just as well as they're finding a candidate that works for them. And when you both agree, it's really nice. So on the salary side, talked already about some of it, but how do you find the value of the job? I'm not talking about the value of you. I'm talking specifically about the job. Marketing manager in Boston, how much should that be paying? If it's a nonprofit, if it's a for-profit, if it's high-tech, what are we talking about in that salary? There are a ton of websites constantly growing that have this information. Kind of the classics are salary.com, PayScale, Glassdoor, Career Bliss is actually new to me, but it's not new. I'm so bad on me. And any website that has any job information, very few of them don't have salary information there. So you just kind of enter the title of the job, typically the location of it, and then you can filter even more, size of company, industry, all kinds of different things. Another way to find out about what is the value of the job, so you're ready to do your salary negotiation, is to talk to trade associations. Every single one of us have at least 2 trade associations we could belong to, one for your industry and one for your function. So if you were a sales rep in medical devices, there are quite a handful of sales trade associations and quite a handful of medical trade associations. Find the combination or just the one that works for you. Some of them will have salary information available publicly online for anyone. Others you have to be a member. Or you can call them, and sometimes in my trade association days, I'd give people information when they say, look, can you tell me for a bobsledder in Pennsylvania, what should I make? You know, you'd look it up. So you can get it. And then, as I mentioned earlier when I was talking about headhunters and external recruiters, they're an absolute great resource. If you tell them I'm making $50,000 as an accountant, is that good, bad, or indifferent in this market, and can I be making more? They'll fill that blank in for you. Earning the higher end of it, really the language of business is money. Every decision in business has a monetary aspect to it, whether they're bringing in pizza for a Friday afternoon meeting or they're hiring a new person. I mean, there is just money associated with everything. So as an interviewer and as a salary negotiator, you want to have money involved in everything as well. It's not the only thing. I know we all work for many other reasons, but money is part of it. And so when you talk and include actual dollar values of the increase in revenue and decrease in costs in your accomplishments, so this is taking away from the effort that we typically talk about, you will stand out above and beyond everyone, and you'll also be able to so easily get the increase. I had one client that I'm still working with that when we went through the accomplishment, he, and yeah, I actually do work with men sometimes, he was most proud of, and we drilled it down to the revenue. It was a project that generated over $6 million for his employer at the time. And the way he talked about it, you never realized it was that big a project or that big a revenue generator. And once you put money on it, all of a sudden you can see that this guy can hit the ground running and bring in $6 million pretty quickly. And he'll probably do that for his new employers as well. And if you can say just one project I did, and I'm not saying everyone gets to have a $6 million example, it's just he's standing out for me right now. It's so much easier to say, and I think you're $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 off on what the job should be. That kind of range is definitely doable when you're in the 6 figures. You know, if you're still in the 5 figures, 5,000, 10,000, even 15,000 is doable if you're showing that kind of impact on your company. So I'm going to give a little talk about the revenue, the value when you're doing the research. So if you're on a salary.com or CareerBliss or any of that, or the trade association gives you a number, you got to remember there is a gender gap. And whatever number they're giving you is incorporating men and women. So therefore, it's artificially low. Because if we ever want to get rid of the gender gap, we want to aim for what the men are making. So in the U.S. right now, it's roughly 81 cents on the dollar that women are making, but it varies depending on the job or the industry. So in the Department of Labor, there's information, and if you're in the legal profession, women are making 51 cents on the dollar for men, and if you're a special ed teacher, that's one of the better ones, you're making 97 cents on the dollar towards men. So you want to remember that when you're looking at something like this. So I used a purchasing manager in Boston as an example. The median salary is $98,000 and change. So if I was aiming for $98,000, thinking, you know, I'm pretty average, I've only been in this purchasing manager world for a short time, I shouldn't aim for too much, that's going to be my target, I would still be targeting too low to start from. I actually have a mobile app that, let's see if I can get this to work. Oh, there we go. That adjusts based on the individual, the job, gender pay gap for each of the jobs the Department of Labor has. They also have the percentage of men and women making up those jobs, so a little high school algebra, and you can translate whatever your target number is into a similar number for just what the men are making at that stage. So if the median is 98,000 for purchasing agent, it's really 108,000 that you should, well actually 109,000 that you should be aiming towards. So always, whatever the number you think it is, it's going to be higher. If you want to know more, I do have a mobile app for iPhones called Earn More Girl. But you know, you can just aim for 75 too. Shoot higher. That's important. And when you do, this is the part that most people are really scared of, and this is where I'll end it before I open for questions. How do you say no and open up the negotiations without ticking them off? I think everyone thinks it's a fight. Salary negotiation really is just a conversation. Absolutely never, never, never accept the first offer because, one, you really haven't seen the full picture. You want to know the whole compensation package before saying yes. But two, there's always at least a penny more available. No good hiring manager is going to give away everything that they're budgeted for in the first moment. They expect that there could be negotiations and they have to be prepared for them. So they always have some money left over, whether it's like in the example that I started with, $7,000, or it could be much more. But there's always, always money. So a nice, personable, professional way to start that conversation, and it's with the hiring manager or the budget owner, not the recruiter who called you to tell you that they are going to offer you the job. You say, thank you so much for the job. I'm excited about the offer. I'm excited to work with you. Before I make an informed decision, I really need to walk through the entire comp package and who can help me with that. That gets you off the phone so you can have your little excitement dance and know that you're going to have a job, and calming down and walking through everything and seeing like, oh, they're only giving me 2 weeks of vacation. How do I get 3? They're not giving enough of the medical. So all of a sudden, whatever your offer is doesn't look as impressive as it did, and you can really be informed about your salary negotiation. And if it is the recruiter who called you with the offer, you're going to call back to the hiring manager and do the negotiation with them. And that, if I remember correctly, should be my last slide. Let's see if I can finish this. Oh, went too far. So that opens it up now to questions, and hopefully I will have answers. Hannah, do we have any questions? Hannah?
Hi, sorry. I accidentally muted myself.
For a second there, I thought, oh my gosh, I've talked for a half hour and no one's heard me.
No. Thank you. It was a great presentation. I want to open it up to questions from everyone. And to remind everyone to submit your questions, please just type them into the question box on your control panel and hit send, and Katie can answer them. We'll take the first question that came in. I prefer to leave blank the question about desired salary. Do you think this works against me?
No, I think it's brilliant of you, and that's what everyone should do.
Great, concise answer. Perfect, thank you. Here's another. If we try and negotiate with the hiring manager and they push us back to the recruiter, won't that sour the relationship?
No, in sales, there's a thing about selling high and being pushed down. So you always start with the person who owns the budget and to have them tell you to go to their minion. And what this does is allow you to go back to the person who owns the budget, or whether you're selling cars or whatever, or selling to a business. You go to the VP and they tell you to go to the manager. And if something goes wrong with the manager, you go back to the VP and say, I just wanted to update you on the progress I'm making with the manager on the product or service you've been interested in purchasing. That same thing can be done with the recruiter and the hiring manager. It is the hiring manager that's going to be your boss. He or she has the most to care about that you come in happy and within their budget. He or she may also be so busy they don't really want to get involved unless it's getting tricky. They think, well, this is just a typical, we'll give them $5,000 more and get rid of them, and all is good. And if that's the case, fine. If it goes well with the recruiter to where you need to be, fine, but make sure it's based on the value of the market and not just 10% more of your lost salary, because that is what they will do. And you'll just go back to the hiring manager and say, I just wanted to update you on the status of where we are. We haven't been able to make progress at XYZ issue. Is that something that we can possibly come to agreement on? If you say it nicely, professionally, the trick here is to remember it's not an argument. It's you're trying to find a place where everyone's happy. It really can be a win-win situation. Figuring that for the hiring manager, the win is to stay within the budget and get the person they want. And they already told you they want you. And this, by the way, is the most powerful moment you will ever have in the relationship, from the moment they tell you they want you to the moment you accept it. You're never going to have as much power again. So don't give it away. And don't worry about them not liking you. They expect it. It's professional. It's very expected, and they probably did it themselves. See, that was not a concise answer. That was a long answer. But I'm done now.
Thank you. Here's another. I am negotiating with a company in Cupertino. I live in Seattle. What is the expected increase? The cost of living difference is 75% higher.
I can't tell you what that is. You need to do research based on the job in Cupertino and not on the job where you live now. It has nothing to do with what you're making now. It has everything to do with the value of the job in the place you're going to work it. And don't forget to negotiate relocation.
Okay, thanks. Do you think that it is appropriate to ask the interviewer about the position budget? If so, how would you approach that question?
I would not bring up anything about money until you're offered the job. Let them bring it up. Don't you ever, ever, ever. It puts you in a total place of you lower yourself. Every time you open your mouth about money, you're losing $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 because it makes you look desperate. It makes you have a negotiation. I know way too many people who have negotiated themselves out of a job before they even got it, because they get all wrapped up with, oh, you only approved $50,000. I was looking for $60,000. You could have negotiated $60,000 if you waited till you got the job. But now that you're negotiating during the interview process, they're just moving on to the next guy or gal. So don't ever bring it up.
Thank you. How do you negotiate relocation?
Well, first you want to, since you are actually in a different location, this is the one question about budget that is allowed. Are you incorporating relocation in this job? That's all you want to start with at the before I have the job, just to find out if they have it. That doesn't mean you're not still in the running. If they say, no, we haven't, still interview and keep your mouth shut. Don't say like, oh, well, I really need it. Because you can, once again, if you get the job and they like you that much and you were that much better than all the other candidates, they know it's worth that $5,000, $7,500 to get you to move from wherever to. And basically, it's figuring out how much is it really going to cost me, and do I have a lease or a mortgage that I'm still going to have to pay on until I sell it or the lease runs out? Do I have to put any furniture into storage? You know, it's the U-Haul, it's the where am I going to stay while I'm looking for a place? Does the company have a corporate, you know, bigger companies have a corporate apartment kind of thing? Or can they put you up for a while? I mean, or even if it's a really big transition and you're not sure you're going to like it, what about having them put you up for the first 3 to 6 months while you're both deciding that this truly is going to be the long-term permanent solution? And then you pack everything up and you move. So it's kind of figuring out the right fit. And that stuff, you know, if you're a sales rep dime a dozen, which most of us are, we're all not Oprah. We are so replaceable. Even the Pope was replaceable this month. That type of situation is more often than not director and higher level, even VP and higher level, because they can find someone down the street to do the same, or a very specialized talent. If you're in a very specialized occupation, yeah, they will definitely relocate you and pay for that.
Wonderful.
But all of it also, all of it's got to be in combination. Find out what the salary is, all the benefits, and have the conversation about all of it together. Don't, you know, okay, we got the job at $75,000. Now, by the way, I want this for relocation. Don't do that. They don't want you to keep coming back. They want one decision over and out.
Wonderful. Thank you.
No
Here's
problem.
another question. How do you negotiate salary for an internal position? Do we talk to the hiring manager?
Yeah, well, is this for raise? Is there a way to clarify this? I'm not sure if I'm understanding it. Is this for a raise or a new position in the same company? Not that it matters that drastically, but there are little different twists to it. So I'm going to start assuming one way, and if you see that I'm going the wrong direction, just jump in and let me know, Hannah, okay?
Will do, thanks.
Okay, so I'm going to assume this is your manager, and you start the process long before the annual review because they have to allow for the raise. Typically, they're only budgeting, like your department has a 3% increase across the board, and someone might get 0 and someone might get 6. But the manager's got to keep it all within that 3% budget. That you really need to put your head in and say, based on what I'm seeing for the market value of this job, I really believe I'm at the high end, and here's why, and what can we do? And that means that I need a 10, 12, 15% raise. What can we do to make that happen? So that they can start the budget process, because it really is a budget process at that point. They're not assuming that kind of increase. I'll answer both ways. If it is a new job in the company that you want to put your hat in, once again, wait till you get the job offer. Don't open your mouth about anything about budgets or salary. Gee, we have a new job open, and I know I'd be perfect for it, and I know the hiring manager, and I know I can work for him or her. Go to them and say, I'm putting my name in for that job. And then, yeah, you're going to have to do something with HR to let them know, but go to your boss and let them know. Go to the boss that's going to hire that position, and then shut up until you hear that you got the job, and then negotiate it. Now you can ask the next question.
Perfect. It seems like you were on the right track with that. It was a promotion to a new job, so.
Okay, cool. Well, good luck.
Here's the next question. How do you negotiate your salary increase when your manager says that the salary increase was budgeted at inflation rate?
Doesn't matter what they say. They have a laundry list of things they say because that's what they're supposed to do. The first one that you're going to hear more often than not is we can't afford it. The second one is everyone's getting an inflation rate increase. The third one is you're making the most in the department already. How can I give you a raise? And the fourth one, gee, you're making more than me. Those are kind of 4 standards you'll hear a lot. And it's really not your issue. Your issue is to sell yourself again. You're basically in a salary negotiation reselling yourself. And you just say, well, that's lovely that that's how you decided it, but here's the reason why I should be paid more from you. The job is worth X, and you're paying me X minus 20%. I have done X, Y, and Z above and beyond everyone else in the department, so that's more that I should be making. It's all about the arguments, the business arguments, and not about how they've budgeted. His job or her job as your manager is to then go get what he or she can for you to be a happy, good employee. And if you truly are underpaid and they can't afford it, then you know you need to go look elsewhere. But do research on the finances of the company before you have that conversation. Because, yeah, they may have budgeted it at a 2% inflation rate, which is lovely. But, hey, the company's earned 10% growth the past 4 years in a row in net profits. You have the room to give me another $5,000. Don't cry poor mouth to me. So it's not your job to fix it. It's your job to give them the argument so that he or she can go to their manager and give that argument, and they can keep moving it up. Make them realize that you're better than the average. So even though I'm saying we're all replaceable, even the Pope, I want you to remember that, because don't think you have to be amazingly perfect to ask for a salary increase, but you do have to make them think you're amazingly perfect to get the increase. And you need to remind them that with that business argument and include dollar values in those arguments.
Wonderful. Looks like we have time for one last question. How do you respond when the interviewer asks about salary during the initial interview?
Oh, I love this question.
Is it appropriate at this point to discuss what the budget is for that particular position?
This is where it is. So if they ask you, so Hannah, what would you like to make as an accounting manager? You can say, well, you know, I'm really looking for, the first answer is a competitive salary, competitive income. Write that down, everyone keep it. It's the great generic answer that fits all. And they'll say, well, what does that mean for you? And you'll say, well, you know, I've done my market research. I pretty much know what this type of job should pay in this area. Why don't you tell me what you've budgeted for the job, and I'll tell you if that fits my expectations. They're never going to tell you. They'll move on. They may accept competitive and move on from there. If they don't, you do that, well, you know, I've done my research. I know what to expect. You know, feel free to tell me what you've budgeted, and I'll tell you if that fits into my mark. Works, because they're going to also possibly push back with the, oh, well, we don't want to waste your time and our time if we're not in the same ballpark. So can you just give me a hard number? They're going to twist it a few different ways, because remember, they're trying to find out what's the cheapest we can get you at. And if you name a number, you have just made that number the absolute ceiling. And if they name the exact same number, it's just become the floor. So you need them to name it.
Great advice. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
It looks like we are all out of time for today. I would like to thank you all for joining us this evening, and special thanks to Katie for a great presentation.
Well, I enjoyed it. Thanks.
A recording of this webinar will be available online at www.mbawomen.org MBA.com/webinar-recording. Thank you again to everyone, and this concludes tonight's program.